Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to the session today. My name is Engineer Kevin Nyakundi. I'll be taking you through this session today. And about 88 of us now. I know we gotta be joining more of us. Please, in the chat, perhaps before we begin, um, you can invite, your friends into the chat, into the session. I'm certain it will be quite informative. So if there's somebody who you think should be on this call and they have not joined, you can let them know that the session is about to begin. Meanwhile, on the chat, let's introduce ourselves. Let's know where you're joining us from, your name, the country, and perhaps we would want to know who is on the professions that are represented here. If you're a legal profession, if you're an engineer, perhaps just stating which civil, electrical. If you are an architect, a QS, let's just see on the chat. So far, 99 of us. I think good number so far, so good. So let's see who is on the call. Mapola from Lesotho. Welcome, Mapola. And forgive me in case I butcher your name. I'll try as much as possible to pronounce it well. So, Mapola, you could also tell us your profession, which is your area of expertise as well. That would be very helpful. So the rest of the team, kindly, let's just introduce yourself. Let's know where you're joining us from and which field are you in? So I see Peter, highway engineer from Uganda. Welcome, Peter. We have a gentleman from Nepal, all the way from Nepal. Welcome. Malawi, irrigation engineer. We have Peter from Tanzania. Okay, coming in fast and furious. I'm even losing Abner from Namibia. Welcomes, Abner. Good to have you on the call. So, Herbert, electrical engineer from Uganda. Welcome, Herbert. Botswana, we have somebody from Botswana, Malawi, Uganda, Nepal, UAE. Welcome. So let's do the introduction. We give about 5 minutes for the rest of the team to join on the call. Uh, Namibia in the house, South Africa, Timothy from Uganda. Welcome, Timothy. Paul from Nairobi. Welcome, Paul. Collins from Zimbabwe. Welcome, Collins. Sydney from Tanzania. Welcome, Sydney. Good to have you on the call. Let's keep the introductions on. Let's know where you're joining us from, the country, your field of specialization. Just good to get to appreciate who is on the call and what exactly do you do. This evening, we shall be talking about FIDIC, and perhaps some of you are very new to FIDIC. Some of you could be you use FIDIC on a day-to-day basis. So hopefully, gonna learn something new in the course of this session. Okay, welcome all. So we give about 5 more minutes for the rest of the team to join on the call. 170, 80 now. I know we should be more. So good to have you guys. Let's be introducing ourselves on the chat. Ted, good to see you, Ted. I know we've interacted before. Solani from South Africa. Welcome, Solani. Good to have you, Solani. Mulenga from Zambia. Welcome, Mulenga, and amazing. So I see project engineers, electrical engineers, geotechnical engineers, civil engineers in the house, water engineers, construction project manager. Okay, good. A good representation of the fields that we typically would expect that they master and understand FIDIC. And this evening, we'll be talking about perhaps the most widely used forms of contract, that is the FIDIC forms of contract. And I'll be looking at a number of things from, how do you select different forms of contract from Yellow Book, Silver Book, Green Book, and a couple of things, sometimes discussing FIDIC. One of the things people ask me, hey, how do I know which book to use? And I'm certain that tonight you get your answer, definitely. So maybe a couple of, as we wait for the rest of the team, just some key housekeeping rules. Number one, you get to appreciate that we're so many of us. By the time I was coming on call, I think we had about 1,100 people registered. So you can imagine if we were in a meeting setup and person X unmutes and another one unmutes, it becomes very chaotic to manage the session. So you appreciate that we're in a webinar setting, and a webinar setting, you cannot unmute yourself. You can put your questions in the Q&A option, and we'll answer those questions, or in the chat, and I will get to answer those questions. So please, that is the case. So in case at the end of the webinar, there's something that we've not answered, you can always raise your hand and we'll promote you into a panelist, and you can be able to speak at that particular time. So in the course of the presentation, unfortunately, because of the numbers, with so many of us, it's not going to be possible to have everybody. So far, we're about 234. So much more, expecting about 700 or so people, all of us. Now, that is number one. Number two, in my presentation, I'll be making reference some key reports and studies. And those studies, definitely I'll mention where you can find them, but they will also be shared in a FIDIC. We have a community. We call it the FIDIC Learning Hub, the FIDIC Training Hub. It's a WhatsApp group community. So my colleagues, the backend Brenda will post that on the chat, and you can join that. And some of the materials I'll be making reference to will be posted in that particular WhatsApp group, and you can always, indulge and get to appreciate more. You also will get the recording. This session is going to be recorded shortly. I'll start recording it. So you get access to the recording in the WhatsApp group I've mentioned as well, but also you'll receive this on the email that you use to register to the session. The same, you shall also receive the presentation both on the WhatsApp group and on email. So maybe just for the sake of those who have joined, we want to know who is on the call. Please just put your name, your country you're joining us from, and your field of specialization. And good to see a number of you. And by those of you who are contractors, sometimes I like to have contractors on these sessions because of things that I will discuss later on that, of course, matter to both the client, or the person shall be calling the employer, and the contractor within the context of FIDIC. So I mentioned that a couple of things that I will be mentioning will be shared on, especially the reports will be shared on on a separate platform. It's a FIDIC training hub. So if you join, there's a link that Brenda has sent. If you join there, you get access to it. So we shall begin the session shortly, just 1 minute. So we shall begin the next 3 minutes. So in the meantime, please get to just introduce yourself. With me, we have Edward Gold, a civil engineer. We will be having a session to just talk to you a little bit later on. Maybe Ed, you can just introduce yourself to the rest of the team.
Sorry, Kevin, question was it me?
Yes, Ed, I was saying if you can just introduce yourself.
Okay, sorry. Hi, everybody. I'm a colleague or friend of Kevin's, and I attended the course last year, both the FIDIC claims course. I'm just firing up there we go. FIDIC claims course, and then also I did the FIDIC contract certified managers, and then I sat my exam in December last year. So I'm based here in Kenya, doing projects in Kenya, Rwanda, Nigeria. Sorry. And yeah, FIDIC's coming up a lot on various infrastructure projects. So nice to meet everybody, and I'm using everything that I've learned so far. But if you have any questions, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Ed. Ed is a product of the product. Sometimes it's good to have a product of the product in the house. So welcome, guys. I think now at 2:84 we have quorum, and in any event we are at 10 minutes past the hour when we're meant to start. So we shall go ahead straight into the core content. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Inja Kevin Nyakundi. I'll be your host and facilitator for this particular evening. I'll be talking about an introductory part of FIDIC and really what FIDIC is. A number of us from the introduction, I see we are in the construction, the infrastructure, the engineering space. And in the engineering space, there's nowhere where we find much application of FIDIC than in the spaces where you are. The question will then be, what exactly is FIDIC? A number of times I am engaging people and they ask me, hey, wait a minute, we have the red book, the yellow book, the silver book. What is the difference of all these very many books? What is even the relevance of this? So we shall be decoding all that tonight and just getting to appreciate how do you select what form of contract, but what exactly is FIDIC in the first place? And then, of course, later on, I'll be talking to you about how you can advance and to master all this content through the many training opportunities that we have, and of course the highest level, which is of course in terms of becoming a FIDIC certified contract manager. What is the journey like? And for those of you who could be keen on becoming a FIDIC certified contract managers, you want to hang in there. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The session is going to be recorded from now onwards. And as I mentioned, you're going to have access to the recording, and also you shall have access to the slide deck. So welcome, team, to the session. We'll be presenting to you today on the Understanding FIDIC, the global standard for construction contracts. And we're going to have quite a busy evening because of the content that we're going to be covering. We'll be looking at the FIDIC forms of contract, the rainbow suit, and just mentioning about the 1999 and the 2017 edition. One of the things that sometimes people ask me, hey, what is the difference between 1999 and 2017? I'll try to give you a very high level synopsis of what the difference is, in the course of the session. So that is myself, yours truly. I'm an engineer by profession, significant expertise in the space of infrastructure development, expertise in construction contract management, project delivery, and claims management. I hold a professional diploma in FIDIC contracts from the College of Contract Management in the UK. I'm a FIDIC certified trainer, a FIDIC certified contract manager, and perhaps a number of you, we've interacted in different spaces within the sphere of construction. So this evening, I'll definitely be your host in the space of FIDIC, understanding FIDIC. What are learning objectives this particular evening? The evening is packed, as I said. So you want to make sure you grab a cup of coffee or some water. And those of you having dinner, please stay tuned. You can write something down, the better. But as I said, you're going to have access to the materials, just as you shall also have access to the recording. So I intend to do about 75 minutes thereabouts of this presentation. And in that 75 minutes, I hope we'll have understood what FIDIC really is, an introduction into FIDIC suite of contracts. I will hope that you get to understand the difference between Red Book, Yellow Book, Silver Book, get to understand contract risk allocation, a big aspect when it comes to construction contracts. I'll be spending quite some time there because that is the anchor when it comes to FIDIC contracts. We'll also be looking at navigating the FIDIC contracts. We shall be looking at the structure of FIDIC contracts. I'll be contrasting the 1999 and the 2017 edition of the forms of contract. We're looking at selecting the right form of contract. Hey, how do you know if you want to select the Red Book, Yellow Book, Silver Book? How do you know which is to use? I mean, what is the difference between all these? Is it necessary to have all of them? Hey, wait a minute, you shall be learning that shortly. And then, of course, gaining FIDIC contracts mastery. What is the path? What does it look like if you actually wanted to take this beyond this few minutes webinar? So we'll be starting by just getting to appreciate why construction projects and infrastructure projects fail. And I'll be looking at this with the realm of just trying to set the pace for the evening and just trying to look at an aspect of disputes and claims. And we shall see the colossal amounts of time and money that goes into, wastage in terms of projects which have failed. And I'll use that later on just to explain how proper contract management and contract administration helps to minimize, at least if not eliminate that, where we find ourselves. Then what is a contract? We shall be looking at what a contract is, risk allocation. We shall spend some time here to really understand how risks are allocated. And this will be very important because for you, I mean, perhaps some of you already know the Red Book, Yellow Book, Silver Book. Perhaps I should have asked in the chat when we're doing the introduction, those of you who already use FIDIC or FIDIC forms of contracts and which one, but in any case, not a problem. Then, of course, a brief introduction into FIDIC and the Rainbow Suite. We shall talk a little bit about the golden principles, a very high level, just to appreciate what they are and what role do they play in the entire spectrum of FIDIC forms of contract and contract administration and contract management. Then, of course, the FIDIC structure, the FCCM certification, and of course, the key takeaways. Some key ideas for the evening that perhaps are important for all of us to appreciate. Number one is that contracts govern time, cost, quality, and disputes. Indeed, most of us will appreciate that we bring the concept of contracts and contract management into our projects, that contracts do not exist alone. Why are we going into a contract? It's because of a particular project that you want to do. It could be a dam, it could be a road, it could be a power plant, it could be a sewage treatment plant. It could be anything that space, and here we're talking within the sphere of infrastructure engineering and construction kind of projects. So you have an asset that you need to deliver, and then you need resources. When we're executing projects, we execute projects using resources. It so happens that it is almost impossible that we deliver projects alone. Projects are never delivered alone. So we always want to get resources from outside the organization. So our procurement process kicks in. If we bring on board a third party on board, then we need to understand what is going to govern the relationship between ourselves and the third party. And that is where contracts come in place. So contracts come to govern the time, cost, quality, and should there be disputes, as there shall be, how do we go about engaging and resolving those disputes? Mega projects now involve multiple stakeholders, different jurisdictions, and increased risk profiles. Today, especially when dealing with large projects, you'll find that the financier is from is an MDB, a multilateral development bank. It's the African Development Bank. It's a World Bank. The designer could be a design company from South Africa, from Asia, from West Africa, from East Africa, whichever part of the world that they will be. The client might be in Malawi or Botswana or Namibia. The independent consultant might be from a different. So we have these many stakeholders who have a different understanding of projects and different jurisdiction in terms of their laws of their countries, and they have to manage these projects with a common goal, with particular laws governing that particular project. And that is why we say that mega projects now have multiple stakeholders, different jurisdictions, and of course, increased risk profiles. This idea of risk profile is a major one. I'll be delving into it a little bit more. Poor contract management equals delays, claims, disputes, and cost overrun. Shortly, we will be looking at the implication of poor poor contract management. And perhaps a sorry state is that most of us in this space, that means, by that I mean in engineering, infrastructure development projects, we never take this seriously. We never really appreciate the magnitude of what poor contract management does in our projects. And hopefully this particular evening, by the time we finish this session, we'll appreciate a couple of things. Most disputes arise from misinterpretation of contract clauses. And this is a big one. I happened to be facilitating a training some time back in Uganda, and the training had about 65 people. And of the 65 people, 40 were lawyers, and the 25 were civil engineers, a few civil engineers, a few architects, quantity surveyors, and all. And I have no problem lawyers being in the room, that numbers. But my question was, in my expectation, this being a space of construction, I expected more of the technical people in the room. However, it turns out that most of us technical people, we are busy with the technical side. But as we shall see shortly, we failed terribly, most of us. Most of your failures in terms of execution of projects and where most of your cost overruns are going to come from, sometimes it's not so much about the technical side of it. It's going to be how you administer and how you manage your contract. And I'll be showing you some statistics and making reference to some reports, some of which I will want you to, at your own time, to have a look at them. The industry is witnessing an increase in the construction claim values, the values that are in construction. We increasingly seeing projects having more claims in both claims of time, EOT claims, and cost claims. And the cost aspect is also significant. The values are quite high. And shortly, we shall see what that means in terms of numbers, so that I'm not just telling you my opinions. We shall see from credible resources what that means in terms of numbers. Why do engineering and construction projects continually lose time and money? I really wished we were in a meeting setup, because I would have wished to hear from a couple of you to really understand if there's any one of us who have done a project and there was no extension of time, no claim for cost plus profit or cost or whatever, no form of claim. I would want to just have a case study of that. But nonetheless, the projects that have been engaged in on a private level and corporate level, I think about 95% of them, there will be some claims of one form or another, either an extension of time claim or a cost claim or a cost plus profit claim, and all those things are different, as you will get to appreciate later on. But let's just set the context for poor contract management. Now, the Cracked Insight, they do a very amazing reports in the construction industry, And in 2020, they do every year there is a report. So these statistics in the 2025 report, and they surveyed 2002 projects, average capex of this. The number, and this was just looking at the top costs of claims and disputes in construction and infrastructure projects. And these projects span from roads to dams to power lines. You will just get to appreciate this report later on. You can just have it so that you see the industries. It basically all the infrastructure industries where we have had infrastructure. Look at the change of scope. 36%, a little bit narrow, but you can expand it. About 36.9% of disputes arising from change of scope. And we see this. And shortly, of course, we talk about the structure of FIDIC. And this is handled under clause 13 and the variations, how variations come about. But the bigger question here for me is the procurement side. So shortly I'll be talking about contract management and contract administration. But the big idea here is that when you're talking about contracts, we have two sides of the contract. We have what we call the upstream side of the project, of the contract, and we have the downstream side. The upstream side is where we are just trying to come up with the contract itself. What are we going to administer? So how we're forming the contract, discussing the risk allocations, how we're drafting and editing our particular conditions. I'll be talking about the particular conditions, part A, part B, shortly. And all those things which we do in the procurement stage and all the way up to the contract formation stage, the upstream side. It turns out that most of us, most clients, most employers, we neglect this part. We're not so keen on this part. But the problem is, this becomes a major failure downstream. If your upstream is messy, it doesn't matter how good you are downstream, it's going to be messy because you have to try to undo the problems that that were in the upstream. And perhaps some of you, I mean, sometimes when you talk to most of the technical guys, they want to see some graphs. Perhaps some of you could be familiar with this graph. If you're talking about cost, this is the cost of change. So this is cost. This is the y-axis is cost, and the x-axis is time. You all know that, perhaps you don't know. But if you are to plot the cost of the graph of, costs of change as the project progresses, we only say that change is cheapest at the initial phases of the project. That as you advance more into the project, the cost of change becomes exorbitant. So when scope changes come, especially towards the tail end, it becomes a major issue. And hey, that is actually one of the reasons why we have the many books, and I'll talk about that later on. And just getting to appreciate this idea of design, because a number of things come up in terms of changes will be either because of a design issue, either because of the employer's requirements of the specifications given. And then that calls for us to understand who is bearing the responsibility of design. Now, in construction projects, one of the things we say that design risk is a major risk. Design risk is a major risk, and who is bearing that risk is of importance to us. And we shall see how the different forms of contract, FIDIC forms of contract, apportion that particular risk. Design was incorrect, and a couple of reasons there. I just don't want to belabor so much here. You'll have a chance to look at this. Just wanted to highlight a couple of things. Design information was issued late, delayed drawings and the likes, clause 1.9 of the FIDIC forms of contract. Design was incomplete. Contract management and administration failure, about 18.0%. Poor management of subcontractors, again, an aspect of contract management. Workmanship deficiencies, clause 6 of the FIDIC forms of contract, materials, plant materials and workmanship. Access to site was granted late. That is clause 2.1 of your FIDIC forms of contract. So the point I'm trying to illustrate here is that from this report, the main causes of claims and disputes is purely, to a large extent, poor contract management and contract administration. Those are two different things: poor contract management and contract administration. And hopefully, in the course of this session, we're going to pick a couple of things that we can use to try to minimize whatever that we're seeing there. But then you can have access. If you've joined the WhatsApp group that Brenda's, put the chat, you got to get these reports. I'll be sharing these reports after the session on that particular WhatsApp group. This was another cracks report insight into the construction industry. I mean, they looked at 1,600 projects, a tiny fraction of really what the construction industry is, but of some of the most consequential projects at that time. 80 billion USD total value of claims in disputes from the 1,600 projects that they figured. The cumulative extension of time from those particular projects came to about 840 years. I don't know if that is sinking in. I don't know if that is sinking in. And you know what I always say when it comes to construction, perhaps we've heard the phrase, time is money. In construction projects, that phrase is real, so real. If you have 840 years cumulatively in terms of extension of time, what about the prolongation cost? What about the cost associated with that extension of time? What about if you wanted to accelerate so that you minimize that particular problem? But this is a significant amount of money and time in just 1,600 projects. And perhaps this rings a bell to most of us because, as I mentioned, I want to hear if there's somebody who was actually run a project where they had zero extension time and zero costs being extended. So that is disputes over major capital projects worldwide continue to damage the industry to a significant extent, and we can see the numbers there quite. I don't think it's something that is pleasing. I think it's doing badly, right? Turns out that construction projects are more complex than we think. And sometimes the question will be, I mean, these claims, why can't we try to minimize them? But I mean, it's not an easy walk in the park, as it were. So most disputes arise from misinterpretation of the contract. And most of those clauses exist precisely to manage the complexity that we find in construction contracts, the many facets that we have to deal with, the many ideas that we have to deal with when we're managing, from quality to personnel to the relationship between the client and the contractor, or the subcontractors and the main contractor. All that is really what the contract, but that interpretation turns out that actually is a major source of disputes within the construction industry. So the complexity we find is from the multi-jurisdictional approach that we find in construction contracts, the many people the many moving parts who sometimes are not sharing the same legal system. That means currencies, that means the understanding might be very different, and the contract of course tries to govern that. But as the contract governs that, our mind is hinged on what we know. So how I interpret a claim might just be from how I know it from my day-to-day operation. However, that perhaps may not be how the contract defines a claim. So multi-stakeholder, governments, MDB stands for multilateral development banks, end users, communities, EPC contractors, subcontractors, insurers, all have a competing interest. They all have competing interests, and sometimes they want to interpret the contract in a different way to suit them. But how do we make sure that we actually avoid that? We don't want the contract has to be interpreted the way it's meant to be interpreted, not to suit your interest. Of course, technical complexity and financial exposure, as it were. So some of the things which we see, a number of things. So we really say that a main reason why we have disputes is because of misinterpretation of the contract. It turns out that most of us in these spaces, in construction, in infrastructure projects, in engineering projects, We assume that these things are for lawyers, but that is not the case. You're the person who is managing the contract. So how can it be? How can it possibly be another person's responsibility? Yet it is you who is doing this on a day-to-day basis. It is your responsibility to understand the clauses. Some of you, and you know, I have had a chance of being in the upstream side of the contract. And, you know, sometimes with the procurement guys and you know, we're trying to draft or especially the particular conditions, we shall be talking about the difference between that. And, you know, somebody will come and say, you know, we can just delete this clause. It doesn't suit us. But wait a minute. What does that mean to the contract? I'll talk about that shortly. Just going, jumping ahead of the gun there. Let me pause there. I'll describe what I'm trying to explain there, and the value of upstream side, being very keen on the upstream side of your contracts. So the contract that you don't read or understand is likely to be your biggest failure in your next project, not your technical expertise. You're going to get many claims that you're going to get in your project. They might not be because of you missed a drawing because you're very keen on the drawing. It might be because you did not understand a particular clause. You did not understand that the drawings were meant to be submitted on time. You did not understand that failure to, you know, to certify an interim payment certificate under clause 14. What is the implication of that? You have your financing charges. It will be that you're a contractor, you are entitled to a claim, a legitimate claim, but you fail to give a notice on time under clause 20.2. That costs you. That costs you. So your biggest failure, most of you who are technical, I'll almost guarantee in your projects, is not going to be so much on your technical expertise, because that perhaps is top notch. I want to presume it's going to be the soft side, the contract, not understanding the contract, not reading the clauses very keenly, and not interpreting them very well. And hence, of course, this session, why we want to create some awareness on this idea. So let's begin. Let's step a little bit back. I've perhaps given you so much information, and some of you are already wondering, wait a minute, we're speaking about contracts so much. What exactly is a contract? Let's step back and just go back to the basics, the first principles. What a contract is and what does the contract do? What is the contract and what does the contract do? I've already set, you know, a case why we need one. Number one is we are acquiring resources and we need to manage the relationship. So what is a contract? According to the Black's Law Dictionary, 9th edition, it defines a contract as an agreement between two or more parties that creates obligations enforceable or otherwise recognizable at law. So a contract exists and it has to be legally binding. So when you're having this definition, sometimes you ask people, what is a contract? People say it's an agreement between parties. Yes, it is an agreement between parties. However, that is not enough. We can have an agreement with you and it's not enforceable. It's not something that we can take. If it's not enforceable, then it's not a contract. It has to be enforceable within the context, the confines of the law, right? Then, of course, that boils to the question, which law are we talking about? We're talking about the law of the country, the international law. Again, I'll leave that at the moment. Perhaps I'll mention it later on. It's a deliberate engagement between competent parties based on legal consideration to do or abstain from doing a specific act which can be written or oral. Of course, most construction contracts are written. So that's basically what a contract is. A contract turns out that it has 6 elements. For a contract to be a contract, it has 6 elements. So we have an offer. There is a clear proposal to enter into a contract. Now, for construction contracts, how does the offer come? You give a bid documents, and the bidders, the prospective contractors or subcontractors will bid, and we have the letter of tender. So the bid documents basically is the contractor is offering their services at a particular price. So that is an offer. Then there's an acceptance. So the employer or the client has to accept. So acceptance is an unambiguous agreement to the offer's terms. So I agree to your terms. So as the client, I agree to what you've proposed, to do this road, to do this dam, to do this house at a particular amount of money within a particular time frame. So that's an acceptance. So usually it comes into being when we have a letter of acceptance from the employer to the contractor, from the employer to the client, to the contractor. Again, in employer contractor are parties in the FIDIC forms of contract. So sometimes you might call them what you could ordinarily we could call client is what we're calling the employer. It could be a state agency, it could be a private firm, it could be an individual who's an employer, right? Then of course there has to be awareness. That means and how is this awareness? Typically is by signing. When you sign a signature, it means that you've read, and that creates the awareness. Then of course there has to be a consideration. For a contract to be a binding contract, there has to be a consideration. What is a consideration? A consideration basically means that parties, it's something of value of exchange. So typically it will be price, the contract sum that you give. That is the consideration. It means that we cannot go into a contract for pro bono services. So if I cannot even go into a contract with you and tell you, hey, I'm giving you this pro bono. That is not a contract. It's not enforceable. For it to be enforceable in law, there has to be a reasonable consideration. So an agreement to offer a pro bono service cannot amount to a contract. Capacity, the parties have to have capacity to enter. The parties must be legally competent to a contract, so they cannot be minors. If they're legal entities, they must be, if they're companies, they must be incorporated in the country. They must be recognized as being able to go into a contract. Now, of course, there has to be legality. We cannot go into a contract to do illegal things. That is basically some of the elements of a contract, some of the legalese there, nothing. So if you think about before you is basically a sequence of the principal events during contracts. So you will issue the tender documents, then the bidders are going to submit. In FIDIC, we say 28 days before the submission deadline. We call this the base date. This is a very important date, ladies and gentlemen. If you are using FIDIC forms of contract, base date is a very important date. You want to know it because in your contracts, we make reference a lot to the base date. For example, foreseeability. When you say that an event was unforeseeable from when? So the base date becomes your reference point. So it's a very important date that you want to appreciate and understand what it is. Then, of course, the contractors accepts the contractor's receipt. So the employer gives the letter of acceptance. So from the point where we give the letter of acceptance, now a contract exists. Now this is the point where we have a contract. That is the point where, so those are the activities that are taking place. Of course, once the contract now is in place, then we'll have the commencement date. This is in FIDIC, this is covered under clause 8.1. There are conditions which have to happen before commencement, the notices. Then from commencement, we have the time for completion, typically would be in days, 750 days or so, 360 days or something like that. Then we might have events which cause delays. So we call delays which could be attributable to the contractor. If they're attributable to the employer, of course, the contractor has a recourse. Then, of course, we have tests on completion under clause 9, then completion date, then defect notification period runs, then we return the performance certificate and etc. So just a sequence there, but I wanted to just focus on the contract aspect of it because that is how basically the contract formation stage, which is very key as far as we are concerned. So what is the primary purpose of a contract? The primary purpose of a contract is to define many things, but it defines the scope of work, the price, the timeline, and crucially, it allocates risks. This is a very important part of the contract. So when you're looking at contracts, most of us, we want to look at contracts from the aspect of what scope of work has been apportioned, what scope of work has been allocated to who. So, and that is correct, that is good. But we say that we are looking at scope, price, time, as well as risk. So which party carries what risk and how is the risk priced, insured, and mitigated? Can I have in the chat? Can somebody tell me what is the risk reward theory? Can somebody mention there the risk reward theory? What is the risk reward theory? Can I get somebody on the chat? Because I want to delve shortly into risks. So risk reward theory basically says that the higher the risk, the higher the price. Thank you. Somebody say the higher the risk, the higher the price. That is the correct position. That's the same thing that happens in contracts. If a contractor is bearing more risks, then they will charge you more. They'll charge you more. So contracts where the risk is high, ordinarily the price is going to be high. The contract price, the contract term is going to be high. So that is important that you understand. And risk allocation is a major aspect of construction contracts. And part of the claims, we talk about claims. Part of the reasons why we have claims is basically because of this idea of risk, or what risk has been allocated to a particular party. And that is something that you really want to understand and get to appreciate. So we have ordinarily, when you want to go into a contract, you can get a lawyer and tell you, hey, can you craft for me a contract to what we call bespoke contract? So I want to do a power line, I want to do a dam, I want to do a road. We can get a lawyer and they craft for us, they will draft for us an agreement which becomes legally binding. We all sign and all. But you can imagine when you are in an institution which is doing so many projects, how many of such bespoke contracts can you do? But also, as the world becomes more of a global village, you'll find that we have a project in Ethiopia and we have a contractor in Kenya who wants to do that particular project. What we do? I want to apply for the contract in Ethiopia. If they're going to have bespoke contracts, I need to understand the laws of Ethiopia. I need to understand how they form their contracts. I need to understand everything around contracts in Ethiopia. You are a contractor from the UAE and you want to go to Namibia or Botswana for a road project that has been advertised there. You need to understand the laws and their bespoke contracts there, what we call the standard form of contract there. And it turns out that most of these contracts, as we know them, for particular countries, they sometimes allocate risks disproportionately. So you find that the contractor, for example, might bear more risk. You might find that the contract is allocating the contractor more risk. And that is a big issue. So for example, when you look at the Saudi government tenders and procurement law, the contracts that are usually drafted by the Ministry of Finance, they're heavily in favor of the employer. So if you're an international contractor wanting to go there, and if they are telling you they want to use their local laws, their local contracts, sometimes you are not too sure. So what happens is that in the global international space, we now have what we call standard forms of contract. And the idea of standard forms of contract then is that they try to create some sense of fairness in terms of risk allocation, fairness in terms of uniformity of definition of terms, fairness in terms of everybody will understand them. So if I'm in Kenya and I want to apply for a Red Book contract in Ghana or a Red Book contract in Lesotho, I know what the Red Book says. I know what clause 4 of the Red Book says. So if I understand the Red Book, it doesn't matter where I am in the globe. It is the same. And besides, actually, most of this local, what we call the standard forms of contracts for the different countries, most of them, they tend to copy just these FIDIC forms of contract and the NECs and the JCTs. So we have a number of standard forms of contract. We have the JCT contracts, what we call the Joint Contracts Tribunal. We have the IEC contract, the Institution of Civil Engineers. We have the FIDIC contracts, the Federation of International Consulting Engineers contract. Then we have the NEC contract, the New Engineering contract. All these are different forms of standard forms of contract. So FIDIC is not the only standard form of contract. However, it turns out that FIDIC is the most commonly used standard form of contract in more than 200 countries. So FIDIC has been embraced. So you'll find, especially in Africa, Middle East, good portions of Europe, Asia, there's a lot of usage of FIDIC. So FIDIC is, in all the other forms of contract, FIDIC is the most commonly used standard form of contract, established in 1913. NEC was established in 1993, very recent, 1945, the IEC, 1931, the GCT contracts. But that said, they don't find as much application as FIDIC forms of contract. And of course, nevertheless, in our particular class here, our interest is on FIDIC, but I'll just letting you to appreciate. I want us to appreciate something very important around contracts, and that is on risk allocation, risk and risk allocation. All projects have some sense of risk in them. In all projects, we have risks. We have risks. And there can be a myriad of risks, so many of them, and we have to know who carries which risk. So we have standard definition of what a risk is. The BS 4778 defines risk along the idea of systems. The Pembroke Guide defines risk as an uncertain event or a condition that if it occurs or it has an effect, or positive or negative, on at least one of the project objectives. And that is the most important part, that when a risk materializes, there will be an effect on the project objectives. And construction contracts inherently have risks in them. We have the risk of unforeseeable ground conditions. There is the risk of delayed payments. There is the risk of exceptional events, or that is in the 2017 edition. If you're talking about the 1999 edition, there's the risk of the force majeure clauses, events. So very many reasons why we'll be having risks. And risk, to a large extent, we can look at it as consequences and probability. What is the consequence? What is the probability of occurrence? These are two very important things. So when you're looking at risks, we cannot talk about risks without appreciating what is the consequence of the risk if it occurs, and what is the probability of that risk or of that occurring. I mean, if you take an example, when you are crossing the road, I mean, there's a risk that you can be knocked down by a car, right? And that the consequence will be very grave, very dire. You might lose a limb, you could die, or the worst case scenario. But what is the probability if you actually cross a road properly? I mean, right? The probability is small. So we actually cross the road without even thinking it's a risk, but it's a risky thing, right? And especially in some countries. Huh? So that consequences and probability. So we always have to look at the consequences and and this, I'll explain why this is very important in projects for anybody to care to understand. So construction risk has, we have ground risks, we have design risks, weather risks, delays, payments, regulatory risks, etc., currency fluctuations, changes of laws and the likes. And all these risks are potentially likely to happen along in your project. So you have to understand which party carries that risk if it occurs. Which party will carry that risk if it occurs? So the overriding principle when we're talking about risk allocation in project is always allocate the risk to the party that is best able to control and handle the risk. Which party is best able to control and handle the risk? If you're talking of execution risks, for example, it is the contractor who is on the side. It is a contractor who knows the methodology they're going to abuse in executing the works. It then makes sense that execution risks should be handed over, should be apportioned to the contractor. But an important thing to remember is that construction risks belong at the beginning. at the beginning, who to whom does the project belong to? To the client, to the employer. So all risks at the beginning belong to the employer. All risks, 100%, belong to the employer. But the employer feels like the client feels like they cannot take up all these risks. So they will apportion some risks to the contractor. The contractor might feel like we cannot take up all these risks. They can apportion some risks to the subcontractor. But at the beginning, all risks belong to the employer. That is important to know. And the employer has to decide that the employer is the client, by the way. So they have to decide which risk am I taking up, which risk am I retaining, which risks am I sharing, which risk am I transferring to the contractor. And remember the risk reward theory. If I'm transferring a risk, I expect a payment. I expect to be paid. I expect a premium. Right? Okay. So always this minimizes the total cost of the project and dispute. So by allocating, what we're saying there is that by allocating a risk to the party that can best control that risk, it minimizes the total cost of the project and the disputes. So let's take, for example, the risk of unforeseeable ground conditions. We apportion that risk to the contractor. The contractor is going to say, okay, not a problem, Mr. Employer. I'm going to take up the risk. However, I'm going to charge you a premium. So what that happens? The cost of your project goes high. But remember, what is a risk? A risk has a probability that it might not materialize. So you as a client, you as the employer, you could be paying a premium for what might not occur. So sometimes what the employer says, hey, let me retain this risk. If the risk occurs, then I will allow you. In the contract, we shall have a mechanism for the contractor to then claim. So the employer is taking the risk and says that if the risk occurs, then I will incur a cost at that time. Then I'll give you a chance to claim cost plus profit or extension of time. So if I transfer that risk then to the contractor, I am going to pay more. So that's really the point there, that you want to make sure that you're transferring risks which you must transfer, because if you transfer some risks, you might end up making the contract so expensive that it's necessary. And you might perhaps not want that. Then also it helps to minimize disputes. So if you transfer a risk to a party that's not able to handle that risk, then also it gets to a point where you make your project so risky. So you want to make sure that we're transferring a risk to the party that can best handle the risk. So one of the key things you have to remember is that in construction contracts, all risks must be apportioned. No risk should be left hanging. No risk should be. If you leave a risk hanging, you increase the chances of disputes. I was having a discussion with a team from Mauritius a couple of months ago, recently, and they told me that, for example, they get rid of the force majeure clause. It was a FIDIC discussion. And I told them, okay, that is fine. You delete it. You can always delete a clause if you don't want to use it. The standard forms of contract, they're not like a Bible. So you can always delete what you don't want to, a Bible or Quran for that matter, you can always say that we delete this clause. But the problem is one. When you delete a clause which is apportioning a risk, the question you want to ask yourself is, wait a minute, what will happen when this risk actually materializes? So when you delete the clause, force majeure clause, for example, clause 19 in the 2019 in the 1999 edition of FIDIC forms of contract. When you delete that clause, the question then is, what will happen when a force majeure clause event materializes, occurs? There will be a dispute, because then we now have to figure out who is going to carry that cross, who is going to bear that cost. So we shouldn't leave any risk hanging. If any risk that is left hanging is a potential for disputes in construction. Part of the reason why we saw those high, and this is what I was alluding to earlier on. developing some procurement document, and we're editing the particular conditions. And one of the guys says that, we need to delete this. But wait a minute, if we delete this is apportioning a risk. So when we delete this, when we are actually executing the project and this risk materializes, who will bear because either the employer or the contractor has to bear that cost. The party that is able to control the risk needs to take the risk, and we need to have stability across the entire project life cycle. So in risk allocation in construction projects, we use what we call the Abramson principles to allocate risks to parties. And this basically, the Abramson principle basically refers to, it's a set of foundational ideas of fair risk allocation in construction projects. So it basically helps to answer who should carry which risk in a project. And we look at key things, 4 things. Number 1, foresight. Which party can best foresee the risk? The party that can best foresee the risk should perhaps be able to carry that risk. Which party can best control the risk? The party that can best control the risk should carry. So if you push a risk to a party that cannot control the risk, for example, unforeseeable ground condition, you push it to the contractor. The contractor cannot control that risk. They will charge you. So who can best control that risk? The site belongs to the employer. The site belongs to the client. Who had the best? The employer has had the site. They are the best position to do detailed geotechnical studies. The contractor is coming on board to bid. Perhaps the bid documents are to be submitted in 3 days, in 3 months. They may not have all the time. And even so, the contractors are bidding. We have very many bidders, 20 of them bidding, and one person is going to win. So the contractor doesn't want to spend so much money going to do extensive geotechnical studies, because that will be at a cost. And what if I don't win the contract? How will I even be compensated? So the party that can best control the risk needs to take that risk. Then the capacity, which party can best bear the risk? And finally, which party can best benefit or suffers from the risk? That is what the Abramson principles basically touch on in risk allocation. This is very key. We use it across multiple contracts, and not just FIDIC forms of contract. Even in your local contracts, you can try to use this and just appreciate. So risk allocation is just, for example, a matrix of the 2017 edition on how risk is allocated, design works. If we talk about the red book, the employer takes that risk, the contractor takes the risk in design build, the yellow book, the silver book, the contractor takes full responsibility. Setting out data, the employers in the yellow and red book, the contractor in the silver book. So one of the things that we shall talk about these forms of contracts shortly. Just trying to make sure that I'm sticking to the time. I'm seeing the time rushing so much. So you'll have this, just have a look at this. But we use this as a procurement decision tool to appreciate which risk is going to which party. This helps us to know which form of contract do we want to use. Do we want to use the yellow book? Do we want to use the silver book? Do we want to use the red book? And of course, there are issues around that. I'll be discussing that shortly. It is important to appreciate the reason we're talking about these risks and risk allocation is that no one builds alone. You as the employer, you as an agency, you as a client, you will not build alone. You need other parties. The contractor does not build alone. They need subcontractors. So we have these interdependencies within the built environment space. And that shapes risks, responsibilities, and rewards. And that is exactly what the contract comes to do. That is exactly what the contract comes to do, to make sure that these risks, rewards, and responsibilities, they are balanced. They are balanced. And FIDIC is used, and shortly we'll see one of the advantages of FIDIC. We use this largely because of there's a sense in which it tries to allocate these risks in a balanced way, so that the employer left alone, it's the wish of the employer that they never carry any risk, that they never apportion any risk to them, that all the risks are transferred to the contractor. That makes the project, and that transference, we want to transfer the risk without allowing the contractor to, charge a premium for it. So that makes the project risky. So And one of the reasons why, especially international contractors, will always want to lean more towards a FIDIC form of contract as opposed to a bespoke contract is because how are risks being allocated in your contract? So FIDIC, we always say, there's a fair risk allocation between the parties of the contract, and that is the most important aspect. And that's why I'm saying that, risk allocation is a key thing. So far, so good. Can I see anybody dozing? How many of you are dozing? Thumbs up if you're not dozing. Thumbs down if you're dozing. Okay, so can see people are attentive, and I hope it's making sense. I hope you're getting to appreciate what you're talking about in terms of risk and risk allocation, as it were. So let's talk about something. I just want to do some brief introduction there to Felix. Thank you, guys. I say we are up. We are up and listening. So what is FIDIC? FIDIC is an acronym from a French terminology, and I will not want to pretend to pronounce it because it's not one of those that I try to pursue furthest. But translated to English, FIDIC means International Federation of Consulting Engineers. It's headquartered in Switzerland, Geneva, Switzerland. It was founded in 1913, as we already saw. And what they do is they publish standard forms of contract commonly used in large infrastructure and engineering projects. We see FIDIC forms of contracts in airport construction, hospitals, roads, dams, sewer lines, power lines, hydro projects. So malls, some countries actually use FIDIC as their primary form of contract. I was in Mauritius, and in Mauritius, basically, that is what they use. That is the standard form of all construction, be they small construction, small scale construction or large scale construction, they'll use FIDIC forms of contract, either silver book, yellow book, green book, and we shall see all those differences and get to appreciate where they're used. But nonetheless, it's just important to appreciate what they are. And for example, in Kenya, and I think even Uganda, and I had a chance to look at even South Africa, there are standard forms of contract. What they've done is basically taken the FIDIC forms of contract. In Kenya, they've taken the Red Book, for example, 1999, and just modified it. So when you look at the PPRA document, that's the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority documents on most of the civil and engineering works, they're just purely the Red Book, which is they have taken the Red Book and traced to. So you can map almost everything into that document from the Red Book. So good understanding of FIDIC definitely gives you a very good understanding of most of the construction contracts like you never imagined. So we have different forms of contracts, different forms of FIDIC forms of contract. We have the Red Book, we have the Yellow Book, we have the Silver Book. This is what we call the Rainbow Suite, and we shall be focusing more on this. But we also have what we call the Gold Book, we have the Green Book, we have the White Book. The Red Book is a construction. It's titled Conditions of Contract for Construction. And it's for employer designed, and it's a measurable contract balance risk. I will talk about this. Perhaps I should go to the next so that I can talk about this. The White Book is for consultancy services. So when you want to get a consultant on your project, when you want a project manager on your project, when you want a construction manager on your project, you use a White Book. So it sort of works. The others, the Red Book, Yellow Book, Silver Book, Gold Book, or Green Book, they are what we call, they are works contracts. The White Book is a services contract. The White Book is a services contract, is used for service agreement. So, and we shall see all this shortly. So perhaps let's go into more detailed slides to get all this before. The Red Book. The Red Book is titled Conditions of Contract for Construction. We have the 1999 edition and the 2017 edition. The 2017 edition is the most recent one. And it's used for building and engineering works designed by the employer. So a key difference in the use of the Red Book is that these are works which are designed by the employer. So the client designs this. So the employer could be a government agency. It could be a large corporation. It could be an individual. So what they do, they design these works. So they could get a person to design for them, or they can use internal resources to design. So the most important thing is that they design. If you think about it, when we're talking about project delivery models in the infrastructure space, we have multiple of them. We have the design, bid, build. So the design, bid, build, where the employer has designed. Then from the design, we then get the scope of work. So we submit bid documents. So the bidding process, then we build. So the contractor comes to build as per the design of the employer. So this is where the red book is used. So because it's a design bid build contract, it's a remeasurable contract. It's a remeasurable contract. That means we measure. And that measurement is governed by clause 12. So the red book is not a lump sum contract. However, I have seen people using the red book as a lump sum contract. And of course, you can edit your particular conditions and make it a lump sum contract. However, you really want to make sure that you do the right thing because, for example, you have to make sure that you delete clause 12. You have to make sure that you alter clause 13.3.1 because any clause that makes reference to clause 12, you have to delete it or modify it because clause 12 talks about remeasurement, measurement and evaluation. So the works might include some elements which are designed by the contractor, but very minimal. Most of the works are designed by the by the employer. Now, the engineer is responsible for administering the contract. So FIDIC forms of contract, and indeed most of the standard forms of contract, because they deal with technical work, these contracts are administered by professionals in that field. So in FIDIC, a person under clause 3, the employer has to appoint an engineer who will administer the contract. Now, it doesn't mean that the person who is, of course, FIDIC says that you got to be a professional engineer, but that is in the general conditions. Remember, in the particular conditions, you can always edit that. So if you want to have another person now, an architect, a QS, I've seen FIDIC forms of contract being administered by QS, you have to go to the particular conditions, special provisions, part B, and then you do a modification. So in the part B of your particular conditions, that's where you alter anything that is the general conditions that you want it to suit you. If you want to change the risk profile, a risk that has been apportioned to the employer, want to push it to the contractor, you do that in the particular conditions, special provisions part B, not part A. I'll talk about that shortly, but just important to appreciate that. So that is the red book. The main distinction there is that we have clause 12 for remeasurement. It's a remeasurable contract. The works are designed by the employer, and that the engineer is a person who is administering the contract. But should you want any other person who is not an engineer as defined under clause 3 to administer the contract, then you want to make sure that you go to your particular conditions, part B, and do that particular modification there. Then, of course, it has a balanced risk allocation. It has a balanced. What we mean by balanced risk allocation is that one party is not bearing all the risks. The contractor is not bearing all the risks. So there are some risks which the employer is going to hold on to. They will be apportioned to the employer. However, should the risk materialize, then the contract provides a mechanism in which the contractor can claim. The contractor can claim. And there are a number of such cases that we look at when we go into the details of this course. Then, of course, we have the yellow book. The yellow book is titled Conditions of Contract for Plant and Design Build. So this is where you want to do design build. So we talk about design bid build. Design bid build is under the red book. The design build is handled by the yellow book. This is used for electrical and mechanical plant works and engineering works where you are doing design build. So those of you mechanical engineers, electrical engineers I saw in the room, chances are very high that this is where you'll be using. It doesn't mean that this is only for, it's also for design build. So if you want to do a road and you want the contractor to design and build it, then this is what you want. You want to do a hospital, you want the contractor to design and build, this is what. And of course, in the grand scheme of things, nowadays we see most employers, most clients preferring to go to the design build approach as opposed to the design build. One of the downsides of the design build approach is that one party, either the employer will get a consultant or an independent person to design, or internal teams to design. Then we bid the works to be executed. The challenge with that is that we have a lot of back and forth in terms of constructability issues, and also that potentially, especially the multilateral development banks have also come to say that under the Red Book, they find a lot of claims. So there's this tendency now to want to move into the design build, the Yellow Book, because then one party is designing and building. So you cannot later on say that this thing was designed badly, so constructability issues, we minimize that, and that of course helps a lot in terms of complex projects where designs, very accurate designs, where the scope of work might not be very well known. You usually want to use the design build. Hospitals, airports, hydropower plants, they're usually very good candidates for design build projects. So design and execution. So the employer provides what you call the employer's requirements. So under the Yellow Book, we shall see what you call the employer's requirements. So in the Yellow Book, we don't have specifications, because when do we give specifications? You give specifications if you have designed. So in the Red Book, you have specifications. In the Yellow Book, we have employer's requirements. So the contractor designs and constructs in accordance with the employer's requirements, and it's a lump sum price contract. So payments under this will be governed by a schedule of payments, which typically will be part of the contract. So you have a schedule of payments where how payments will be made. It's a lump sum contract, unlike the Red Book, which is a remeasurable contract. So clause 12 of the Yellow Book talks about different things. It talks about tests after completion. Clause 12 of the Red Book talks about measurement and evaluation. In the 1999 edition, in the 2017 edition, we talk about measurement and evaluation. Those of you who are good in English, you can tell me the difference between evaluation and evaluation. I don't really get the much difference, but nonetheless, FIDIC found it suit to rename that in the 2017 edition, and shortly I will take you through that. The engineer is responsible for administering the contract. It's also a balanced risk contract. Then we have the Silver Book. This is the EPC turnkey projects, the EPC turnkey projects. This is for provision of process plant, power plants, factory, or similar facility, infrastructure project, or other type of development using an EPC model where the contractor is doing everything. It's used where the employer wants to have very minimal involvement. I don't know the son of any of you who knows the idea of the turnkey. The idea of turnkey is that I want to give the contractor the scope of work, the employer's requirements, and I want to go away. I don't want to be involved. At the turn of the key, when the project is done, at the turn of the key, I have access to the services and the and basically what was promised in the project. So turnkey approach. It provides fully equipped facility ready for operation at the turn of the key. Turnkey project, that's basically what it means. It offers high level of certainty regarding final price and schedule. So turnkey projects, the EPC, the Silver Book, is used where the employer or the client wants certainty in terms of price. So in the turnkey approach, there are very minimal chances of claim. Most of the risks, up to and including errors in the employer's requirement, they are shifted, they are transferred to the contractor. So as you can imagine, because we are transferring almost all risks, project risks, construction risks, even to the risks which ordinarily in the Red Book, Yellow Book, the contractor, the employer takes, we are now transferring them to the contractor, is because we want to make sure that the employer wants to make sure that the price in the turnkey price is going to be the maximum price that I want to pay. I don't want any variations in terms of cost. But you can imagine how much how much risk that is to the contractor. So because you're pushing so much risk, because the employer is transferring so much risk to the contractor, it also means that the turnkey projects are going to be more expensive than the yellow book and the red book projects. So if you were to put them in a scale, you'll find that the cheapest project will be the red book project. If you're to do the same project with the red book, it will be the cheapest. Then we'll have the yellow book project will be, then the most expensive project is going to be the turnkey project because of most risk. Yellow book because the design risk now move to the contractor as opposed to the red book. So that is the scale of things. But of course, a couple of things that you perhaps want to appreciate also is that it's a lump sum contract, it's a minimum employee involvement, and the employer is responsible for administering the contract. So we do not have an engineer in the silver book. So if you're having a discussion and you hear somebody saying, we have an employer's representative, the engineer is in the red book, yellow book, not in the silver book. The silver book, we are what to call an employer's representative as a contract administration person. It's not suitable for where we have insufficient tendering time because we're going to transfer so much risk to the contractor. The contractor wants to have sufficient time to basically go through the entire tender, sometimes even do their own geotechnical studies. Because of that, you need to give them sufficient time. So if you only have 3 months, 2 months to tender, then the silver book is not a good form of contract to use. The bidding process does not allow negotiation. Then that might not be a good because the contractor might price too much. You also want to make sure that we have a way of negotiating. So negotiation is a key aspect for this kind of contracts. Then it's where you have substantial underground work. Underground works are inherently very risky. There's a lot of unknowns when you're dealing with a tunnel, when you're doing a subway and it's all underground. So where you want to deal with underground works, then you don't want to use a silver book. You rather use what you call the emerald book from FIDIC. It's also used for the tunneling works and the underground works. Close control and supervision. If the employer wants close control and supervision, then this is not your book. This is not a good form of contract. You might want to use another form of contract. The gold book is for design, build, and operate. So it's just similar to silver book. The only issue here is that there's an operation period. So it also governs that operation period. It's also a lump sum contract, minimum employer requirement, more certainty in terms of price. The green book is a short form of contract. This is used for small projects. It's typically about 26 pages, nothing much. It uses straightforward language. It's uncomplicated for low value work, typically $500 and $500,000 and below. The contractor constructs the work as per the design provided by the employer. So we're seeing a number of people adopting the green book. If you're not doing a major project, then the green book is a good way to go to. It's a standard form of contract, still balanced risk allocation between, but then doesn't have so much contract administration issues, which then makes your contract administration process very affordable. Is that okay? Thumbs up if things are if we are in sync, or I left you behind. Good. I see we are in sync. And forgive me, so much cover a short time, but hopefully we'll be there shortly. So if you want to make a decision and consideration of, hey, what form of contract, what form of method should I use? You have to look at the value of the project. So if you're dealing with a small project, then the green book is a place to go to. The complexity of the project, how complex is the project? If your project is complex, then the yellow book, red book, or the silver book is one of the books that you might want to consider. Who is bearing the design responsibility? In construction, design responsibility is a major responsibility. Design responsibility is a major responsibility. And we always look at design responsibility in conjunction with the fitness for purpose. In deeper explanations, we get to appreciate that, but important to appreciate that. Certainty of cost. Do you want certainty of cost? Then the silver book is a good book to go to. Day-to-day control. If you want to have today control, then the yellow book or the red book is what you might want to use. Operation and maintenance after completion, if you want to have, there's an operation period, then the gold book is perhaps what you might want to settle for. So your question would be, hey, Kevin, we have talked about so many of these books. How do I select which book to use? Wait a minute. I gotta help you here. So this flowchart here, this is how we decide on which book to use. You are gonna ask yourself a couple of questions. Now, it is important to know that this is a responsibility that the client or the employer has to make. So is it a straightforward project? If it's a straightforward project, small project, then straightforward, yeah. If your answer is yes, then you want to go to the green book. If your answer is no, then you have to ask yourself another question. Of course, if it's not a straightforward project, means a complex project, then you know that the other books can. So then you want to ask yourself a couple of other questions. Is the employer doing the design? If the employer is doing the design, then you will use the red book. Or the variation of it, which I did not mention, by the way, is a pink book. The pink book is a variation of the red book, but it's largely used for projects which are donor funded, not donor funded, multilateral MDBs, multilateral development banks, the World Bank, JICA, Africa Development Banks, and the Asian Development Banks. They came up, they told FIDIC, hey, we love your forms of contract, we have endorsed them, but we could want to have some, some conditions in when we finance projects. And they came up with what we call the pink book. So the pink book is used for those MDB funded projects. So if it is employer design, then you can use the red book or the pink book. If it's not employer design, then you have to ask yourself another question. Do we have planned and is there planned and high level of unforeseeable risks? If we have high levels of unforeseeable risk or we have plant involved in it, then we ask ourselves another question. Do we have maintenance? If we have maintenance, then we go to the gold book, the operate side. If we don't have maintenance, then we go to the yellow book. If we have maintenance involved, that is operation, then we have the gold book. Now, if we don't have the unforeseeable risks are not so high. Now, one of the things I didn't mention, whereas we transfer risks to the contractor in the silver book, we want to make sure that we don't have a silver book contract cannot be where you have very high unforeseeable risks, because then it exposes the contractor to a lot of risks which they have no control over, they cannot be able to foresee them. Then the project might be exorbitantly expensive or risky for both parties. Remember, at the end of the day, this project is not, it's in the interest of the employer or the client that the project is done anyway, right? So then you will go to the silver book. So there's a couple of questions that you might want just to ask yourself so that you know which book to use, but just as a guide, but nothing to really worry you. Let me rush through the FIDIC structure. So there's the forms of contract that we've seen, they have a general structure that you need to understand, we must understand. And all forms of contract, construction contracts tend to follow this structure. So you have the first part is the general conditions, what we call the GCC. Then we have the particular conditions. Under the particular conditions, we have contract data and the special provisions, part A and part B. Part A will talk to the specific project-specific values. For example, which law will be used for this particular project? Maybe the laws of country X will be used, the laws of Malawi will be used, the laws of Kenya, the laws of Uganda will be used for this particular project. What is the project completion time? The project completion time is 375 days. What delay damages are? What is the percentage of delay damages? What is the percentage of performance guarantee that will be provided? So it basically talks to those, that's called contract data, called a contract data form. That is part A of the particular conditions. This is what you edit. The general conditions they're published by FIDIC, or if you're using any other form of contract, the local forms of contract, the PPRA contracts, the JBCC contracts for South Africa, you will use we do not change the general conditions. What we alter are the particular conditions. So part B, we call them the special provisions. This is where we amend the general provisions. So if you want to amend something in the general, from the general conditions, you amend it in part B. You amend it in part B. So this, you might want to change, for example, who is your contract administrator, not the engineer. Perhaps you want an architect or a project manager, we'll edit there. You want to reduce the project, the notice period from 28 days to 21 days, you amend it there. So if you want to amend anything which is mentioned in the general conditions, you do it in the particular conditions part B. This is where the locals, you need to take into consideration the local laws, the procurement laws, etc. Then, of course, we also have the forms of the contract forms. These are executed forms. So the letter of tender, appendix to tender, the contract agreement, the DAB agreements, the performance advance agreement guarantees, they give you the formats and the like. So you want to appreciate all this. So you need to understand all this for the good management of your project, contract administration. So this is basically how the FIDIC forms of contract are. So we have the 1999 structure, the 2017 structure. And basically here, I just try to map this for your own understanding so that you're able to appreciate. So the general conditions, both clause 1 talks about the general conditions. So you want a quick scan, you get to see that in 1999, we have 20 clauses. 2017, we have 21 clauses. So the key difference is that in 1999, why we have 21 clauses in the 2017 edition, is that clause 20 of 1999, we had claims, disputes, and arbitration being under one clause, clause 20. In 2017, that changed. Now, clause 20 talks about the employer and contractors claims, not that employer and contractors claims. Now, clause 20 of the 1999 edition, the employer's claims were handled under clause 2.5. So they were handled here. But in the 2017 edition, they are now handled as together. So it brought some sense of fairness. Then a couple of changes, for example, clause 18 in 2017 is named exceptional events. This is what previously was called force majeure under clause 19 under clause 19 of 1999 edition. So in 2017 we don't have force majeure, and the reasoning is that force majeure is a legal doctrine, but under that particular clause, when you go there are some particular conditions which have to be met for a condition to be described as a force majeure event. But it turns out that how we use force majeure within the legal doctrine might not meet those particular, explanations or conditions. So that is why it was changed. Now under 2017, we have exceptional event, and basically just a couple of things you might note. For example, the red book, we have measurement and valuation in 2017, measurement and evaluation in 1999. We have what again? We have what? Notice that clause 12 of the yellow book, it's titled test after completion. Test after completion, but clause 12 in the for the red book is measurement and evaluation. So just some key differences there, nothing major. Key areas of differences, we have 1999, 2017, a little bit shorter, 2017 edition a little bit longer, but more procedural. I honestly love the 2017 editions. They're more procedural. Even when you're very new to contract administration, it makes your work very easy. It gives you the procedures that you need to follow. Very, very, very vital there. It introduces more claims, more definitions. Claim is a defined word, for example, in 2017, it was not defined in 1999. We have more deeming rules. A deeming rule is basically if you don't, for example, make a decision, what does the contract presume? In 1999 edition, a lot of disputes because the contract administrator, the engineer in this case, for example, does not make a determination within for 2 days. Then what happens? It was not clear. Now in 2017 edition, it's clear. If you don't make a determination within for 2 days, then it's deemed either if it's a claim, you've rejected it and the like. So I think it makes contract administration much, much easier you know what, I'm trying to rush because of time, but very interesting there. It's something that you need to be aware of and just appreciate. So, hey guys, the FIDIC forms of contract, we don't use them as a Bible. You can actually change, you can alter. In the particular conditions, you can alter what suits you, right? You can alter what suits you. So as you edit the particular conditions, as you modify the particular conditions, this is where most of us go wrong, because we want to just transfer risks, which you want to transfer the design risks in the red book to the contractor. Yet the red book is structured in such a way that the design risk rests with the employer. So if that happens, then it becomes a challenge. So to be able to assist you in drafting your particular conditions, FIDIC came up with what we call the FIDIC Golden Principles. There are 5 of them in 1999. The FIDIC Golden Principle, they're meant to preserve the FIDICness, the sanctity, if you're to call it so, of the FIDIC forms of contract. So that you don't say that you're using a FIDIC form of contract, but when you look at it, you've butchered it too much, that it's no longer a FIDIC form of contract. When disputes arise, it becomes so difficult to determine the dispute, because risks have been disproportionately allocated. We not follow the Abramson principle. And so we have 5 of them: Golden Principle 1 all the way to 5. Golden Principle 1, duties, rights, and obligations and roles have to be as described or as intended in the general conditions. So, for example, you don't want to reassign the engineer's roles and functions. They need to have clear and ambiguous drafting. So when you're using the word claim, what do you mean? So there has to be. So what FIDIC has done to make sure that we have minimized ambiguity, under clause 1, we have definitions. So clause 1 gives you the definitions. So you want to maintain the terms as defined. You want to maintain the terms as defined. Then, of course, balanced risk reward. This is very key. The risk of unforeseeable ground conditions belongs to the employer in the red book. So that risk cannot be transferred to the contractor, right? Reasonable time periods. The time period for making payments after the IPC, the interim payment certificate, has been certified, or the time period for making a notice of claim is 28 days. For example, you cannot give a notice, you cannot reduce that to seven days. That will be unreasonable. So the time periods, we have to respect that. We don't want to make it so unreasonable. Then, of course, the DAB, we have some inbuilt mechanisms for disputes. That is what we talk about Golden Principle 5. Unless it's in conflict with the laws of the country, we need to follow through a formal dispute adjudication board before you go to arbitration. So we have a number of reasons why FIDIC forms of contract are taken. People love them. Number 1 is the balanced risk allocation, balanced risk reward, global compatibility. So whereas it's based on the common law, they are adaptable across all jurisdictions. So we can use them in the UAE, we can use them in Africa, we can use them in Asia. With just a few tweaks here and there, FIDIC forms of contract can be used anywhere in the world. That is one of the good reasons why they're easily used. Industry recognition, people are familiar with them. So if you say that we have a project in Liberia and we're using a silver book, everybody knows what a silver book is. We know what risks are allocated to you. So all that you need to do is to familiarize yourself with the silver book. And of course, it makes even training easy for people. So once you know the red book, it doesn't matter whether you're in China, Saudi Arabia, Kenya, Tanzania, any part of the world that you'll be in, really, the forms of contract are the same. So uniform structure. So you're not saying, if you're talking about, if you're talking about the red book, clause 1, 2, 3 are all the same. Clause 4 will be, so there's that structure which helps. So we all know clause 19 is insurances in the 1999 edition. So that helps in just understanding these forms of contract and makes our work very easy, of course, and dispute resolution mechanisms. So that is basically all about FIDIC and a good appreciation of it. You know what I mean? I'm even trying to rush. There's so much that you need to just appreciate and know. And let me see if are we on the same page, guys? Am I leaving somebody behind? I hope not. That's not my intention at all. Okay, good. I see we're moving good. Oh, amazing. So that is FIDIC. So and that's really how powerful and strong FIDIC is. And doesn't matter where you are. And I really want us to appreciate as the people in this space, engineers, architects, quantity surveyors, and even our friends, the lawyers, because we're now seeing so many lawyers coming into this space, which is a good thing because in any event when we have issues and we need legal advice, we also need them to know. But the people in this space, you guys who are managing these contracts, I want you not to leave these things to, I mean, this idea that this thing is for lawyers, this thing is about clauses, this thing is about boring. I mean, it's not so. We just want to understand this. And you can and you should understand this. The good thing about FIDIC is that if you understand we've talked about so far, it doesn't matter which form of contract we're talking about, the JCT, the NEC, your standard forms of contract, local standard forms of contract, you will always understand. I think the most logical, the most ordinary form of contract is FIDIC. But I don't know, perhaps one of you has tried to look through the red book and you're like, oh my goodness, now where do I even start? Where do I even start? And perhaps some of you have used these forms of contract and you want to gain more mastery. And you're wondering, wait a minute, I want to go to the next level in terms of understanding, being able to differentiate between these forms of contract, red book, yellow book, silver book, the different clauses. What is the implication in terms of contract administration? I once was dealing with a project, and the project engineer there was saying that, you know what, we have not approved your program. And then I asked the engineer, wait a minute, under what clause are you approving the program? Because in FIDIC, there's no approval of the program. Clause 8.3 doesn't talk about approval of the program by the engineer, not at all. So you saying that you cannot approve the program is not. There is what you have to do as an engineer under FIDIC clause 8.3 as regards to the program and contract administration. So I want to tell you something about the FIDIC certified contract management class and certification and the training thereof that we offer. Now, let's look at a little bit about the FCCM certification, the FCCM, the FIDIC certified contract management. So FIDIC has this certification, it's a globally recognized certification, and we have been, for the longest now, been offering it as part of the training or the training that we do at Peak Point. Of course, we do much more trainings on FIDIC. Some people I saw, perhaps very new, and you've not used FIDIC at all, and you want to just get a glimpse of what FIDIC entails and how do I go about just navigating through the clauses. We have a FIDIC introductory class, and that just covers the red book, and you just get to appreciate the FIDIC structure and what we've been covering. As you can appreciate, it's so much content that I cannot cover in just 2 hours. All right. Then also, some of you have been using FIDIC for the longest, and you feel that, hey, I think I need to do at a higher level of mastery, and perhaps get yourself into dispute adjudication boards, arbitration, at the level of arbitration. And the FIDIC certified contract management certification gives you that know-how. So what is a FIDIC certified contract manager? A FIDIC certified contract manager is a professional who demonstrates knowledge and applied expertise in managing FIDIC forms of contract through the entire life cycle. So it's not just about you understanding FIDIC forms of contract, but also understanding them within the realm of the contract life cycle, from initiation all the way to closeout. So of course, and you have to pass the FIDIC certified contract management exam. And you need to have a deep knowledge of the FIDIC forms of contract. So in the FIDIC certified contract management class, you go through the 1999 and the 2017 edition, the red book, yellow book, and silver book. So you need to know all of them, both the 1999 edition and the 2017 editions. Then of course, you also need to know the FIDIC golden principles and of course the FIDIC procurement guide. And we're going to take you through all that, but within the realm of the contract of the life cycle. So the exam is, you have 100 questions, you have 250 questions, minutes to complete. It's an open book exam. Do not be lied to. People think that it's an open book exam, is an easy exam. Not at all, not at all. Because open book exam means you need to understand your contract. So you'll have your red book, yellow book, silver book, 1999 and 2017 edition, 6 books. You need to have your procurement guide, that's 7 books. You need to have your FIDIC golden principles. Those are 8 reference materials. You need to know, hey, where am I going to refer to? You have 80, 60% for you to pass the exam, but don't worry, that is the very reason why we're having this. So this is the reference material, which I've already said, 1999, 2017 edition of Red, Yellow, and Silver Book, and of course the FIDIC Golden Principles and the Procurement Guide, all which we get to talk to about in the class. Now, how we've tried to structure these classes is, let me tell you, contract management can be very boring, and we don't want to make it very boring to you. It can be so boring to just study this material clause by clause. So what we've done is we have divided this course into 8 modules. And we basically want to align the FIDIC forms of contract within the construction project life cycle, from initiation, pre-construction, execution, quality, communication, financial control, claims management and dispute resolution, and finally, project closeout. So you cover the entire life cycle of your project, but then within the realm of how the FIDIC forms, which clauses are referring to, for example, financial control. We have talked about variations and clause 14. When you talk about quality, you need to go to clause 7, which talks about plant materials and workmanship. You need to go to clause 9, which talks about tests on completion. You need to go to clause 12, which talks about tests after completion. So we need to go to we need to talk about 4.29. That is the CVS. So basically, it's just you understanding FIDIC, and this is how the exam wants you to understand, your FIDIC forms of contract. Not just understanding FIDIC forms, clause by clause, but within them, because the exam is a scenario-based exam. So you're not going to cram. It's not about cramming your FIDIC forms of contract, not at all. I mean, there are too many clauses to even cram. Is getting the context. And of course, you have access to the FIDIC forms of contracts, Red Book, Yellow Book, 1999 and 2017 edition, together with this particular class. So we're going to cover the sequence of the FIDIC contracts of contracts. So from initiation all the way to the defect notification period is over. You have now returned the performance security, and we have discharged the contractor. So we cover the entire life cycle in this particular class. And the aim of this is to advance. This is an advanced course to basically increase your mastery of FIDIC forms of contract, Red Book, Yellow Book, and Silver Book. So the course is based on the Red Book, the Yellow Book, and the Silver Book, 1999 and the 2017 edition. And also participants can opt to do the FCCM exam. So what we've seen previously, we've done, I think, 6 modules so far, and we get so many people in the classes, and there are people who want to come to the classes just to master FIDIC. You want to understand 1999, 2017 edition, the distinctions, what are the key areas to pay close attention to in contract administration. So you come on the board. But if you come on the board and you want to go ahead and do your FCCM exam, definitely a very good preparatory class for you to be able to do this. So the objective of the sessions is to introduce and build on your existing knowledge around execution of projects within the entire project life cycle. And also, if you want to do the exam from FIDIC, which is globally recognized, then you can, of course, go ahead and do the exam. Talk about the course later on. Our promise is that this is the most comprehensive FIDIC certified contract management exam, and I dare say, most comprehensive FIDIC training. As I said, we've had about 6 modules so far. And one of the things that people tell us that, what, I have had multiple trainings in FIDIC, but this was just different. And one of the things we've done is that it's because we've really tried to map the FIDIC form of contract into the life cycle of the project, so that you are talking about project closeout. What are the things that I should look at? And that's really the whole idea. This is what makes this class very unique. And this is a guarantee. If you come to the class and you feel like, wait a minute, this is not all I paid for, you get 100% money back guarantee. So within the first week, you go through the first two modules. The first week you will cover module one and module two. And you're like, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for. I want my money back. You get everything back. So that is basically, of course, how certain we are about this class. So you not be told that, oh, you've already done. No, you get everything back. If you don't like the course, we tell you know what, we really wish to make it better, but we're almost certain. We have given this guarantee for the more than 200 people who've gone through this, and none of them have come back to say that, you know what, I want my money back. They actually say, I should have added the money. So what are the routes if you want to do the FCCM exam? Perhaps you should be able to know. So you want to do the FIDIC Certified Control Management exam, you need to have an engineering degree or a construction management, building services, quantity surveyor, accounting, law. So FIDIC has really given a wider range because it does appreciate that so many people are in this space of construction. So you could be, a legal person and you've dealt with FIDIC contracts in arbitration, in dispute boards. So definitely it allows you to. A minimum of 5 years professional experience, and of three of which is you must have some experience managing an aspect of construction of the FIDIC forms of contract. Now, I've had before people who come and tell me, I've not done the FIDIC form of contract. They ask them, what have you managed? And then they tell me, I've used our local standard forms of contract. Then I ask them, can you share them with me? Then they share with me the PPRA documents. Then I look at it and tell them, can you look at the red book? This is exactly the red book. So just a very high that you've managed construction contracts, you've used any of the standard forms of contract, even for the local countries, they tend to just this. So this is really, how will they check? This is you saying that I've done this. The reason why FIDIC is saying this is because the exam is a scenario-based exam. They just want to make you to be aware that you need to understand your FIDIC forms of contract. So if you come on board and you are able to master the contracts, so be it, and you will go ahead and you do the exam and you will pass. So if you don't have a degree and you want to do this, then the only thing that increases is the number of years go aside, 10 years of experience, three of which is using FIDIC forms of contract or anything that you can easily map to FIDIC forms of contract. Now, for all it's worth, including the reference material, the Red Book, Yellow Book, Silver Book, 1999, 2017 edition, the cost of this training is $750. This is the training cost, or for the Kenyans in the house, that is 85,000 Kenyan shillings. And if you scan this QR code right now, you're going to be taken to a registration page, and that page has a number of classes all the way up to October. We have 3 classes coming up. We have the June class, the October class, the August class, and the October class. So 3 classes left. We've already done 2 classes, so 3 more left. So you can join any of that, and I guarantee you get to appreciate that. So for many of you, 400 of you, for being patient, listening to me, I'll give you a small bonus, but it's going to be valid up to 20th of May. So if you join for the next classes, any of the next classes, and make your payments by 20th of May, instead of $750, you pay $650. Instead of 85,000 shillings, you pay 76,500 shillings for the Kenyans in the house. So that is only valid up to 27th. Beyond that, don't use this. Beyond that, the initial prices are still will hold. So if you join the class and you make your payments by 20th of May, that is next month, you have that discount that you get to enjoy. These are the upcoming classes. The classes are typically 4 weeks. They run in the evening, 6 p.m. to 8:45 p.m. East African time. For those of you in the Central African time, this is going to be, I know we've had a number of people from South Africa, Namibia, Zambia. It's going to be 5 p.m. to 7:45 p.m. your time zone. The rest of us in different parts, I think in the UAE, perhaps it will be about the same time. We could be about the same time slot. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So we have 8, 8 June to 2nd July, 10th of August to 3rd of September, and 12th of October to 5th of November. That is when the trainings. How we've structured these classes is because the FCCM exam runs quarterly. So we have an exam, we had an exam there's an exam that happened in March. Another exam is going to happen in June. So the people who just finished our March class want to do the June exam, those who want to do the exam. Then we have another exam that will run in September. So if you join the June exam and you want to do the September, there is no reason why you shouldn't do that. Then, because after the training, you also have 2 mock exams and multiple. So the idea of the mock exam and the quizzes is to get you ready for the exam. And if you are not doing the exam, it's really to get you ready to master the contracts. So you become good at them. So of course, with these contracts, you become better by how you use them, how frequently you use them. So that's what we're doing. So if you want to do the December exam, then the August and November class can easily make you ready for for that particular exam, and that is really how. So there's a link that my colleague Brenda has posted in the chat. You can scan the QR code, then you will always have access to that. Now, previously, I've had people who come to these sessions and they're like, wait a minute, I've been using FIDIC forms of contract, but mine, the area that I've been having issues with is disputes. We saw how much colossal amounts of time and money, 80 billion, 840 years for only 1,600 projects. That's a lot of time and a lot of money, guys. So some people say, wait a minute, I'm good with FIDIC, but the only place I have issues is I need to understand FIDIC claims, disputes, and arbitration. How do you do about them? What are the contractor's claims? How does risk, the risk we talked about, how does it map to claims? How do I structure my claims? What are the things that I need to make sure that I do not lose entitlements? Contractors, employers losing a lot of money. So they say, hey, wait a minute, I actually want to just understand FIDIC claims, disputes, and arbitration. So we also do those classes. If you want to come, the next class, we have this one, we have evening classes and Saturday classes. And Brenda can post the link for the claims class. So just make sure that if you're going for the claims class, just you picking the claims class. So the next claims class will be from the 9th and to 30th of May. This will be 4 Saturdays, but very elaborate with case studies, and you just get to appreciate how to navigate through the space of claims, disputes, and arbitration process. And of course, you can always move into dispute boards and adjudication for those of you who are keen on. So if you're keen on disputes and arbitration, you're not so much into the other aspects, then we can always check. But those of you who are already joined the WhatsApp group, and some of you are new in this, you're saying, wait a minute, these things are interesting, but I don't have zero experience in this. I just want to start off. So we also run the introductory class of FIDIC, and just this is just based on the Red Book, 1999 and 2017. But just to understand, FIDIC and the structure. Then later on, if you want to get more, you can always do the FCCM, that is the FIDIC Certified Contract Management exam. Now, I saw somebody asking the chat, wait a minute, but we have a team, we have a team of 5 from, is it possible to get a discount, a group discount? So the amounts, if you have 5 people and more joining from the same organization, so you will still pay the same discount. So you don't pay $750. You, instead of paying $750, you pay $650. Or 76,500. So, but that is a group discount for only 5 plus. So if you're 5 plus, then that is something that we can always work with. If you want to have an in-person class and you have a team that you want to, you can always reach out. We can engage and see how we can support you to make your project more successful through this. This is incredible. Sometimes I found people telling me it's a little bit too much, but honestly, relative to what you will find in, for example, the FIDIC Academy, if you went there, the training of what you're offering you here, is not less than 50, not less than 12, $1,300, $1,400, and it's only 18 hours. I think the FIDIC certified contract management, very short course, 5 hours, and it's $950. So much again. And of course, you get access to all the, red book, yellow book, silver book, all the resources, which of course, if you bought them alone, a significant amount of money. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We're going to have, I want to introduce somebody to you who is going to come on board, and this is Edward Gold. Edward Gold is going to come to you. Edward is a chartered civil engineer. He's a FIDIC certified contract manager. Edward was in one of the classes. Interestingly, he actually did both classes, the claims class and as well as the disputes class. Claims, disputes, and of course did the FCCM class. Went on to do the FIDIC certified contract manager, now a FIDIC certified contract manager, and he's a number of years of experience, works with Mace. I mean, Edward, I think I cannot do more justice to you than just let you know.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. No, yeah, it was really useful actually. I've worked in FIDIC for 3 years, 4 years, 2 years in Liberia on a Red Book, and now the last 2 years in Rwanda on a hospital project on Yellow Book. I mean, what I've really noticed is just having all of the contract clauses ready at your fingertips if you need to write letters, if you need to write. So if you want a compliance verification system under 4.9.2, or if you want variations under 13.1, or if you want financial management, or if or all of the processes within claims. You've got issuance of a notice of a claim, then the engineer has to respond in 14 days, then the contractor has to issue their whole claim fully detailed within 42 days. Yeah. And then it's 42 days for then you've got additional particulars, then you've got consultations and determinations under 3.7, and then you move into determinations, and then you move into the DARB and arbitration and notice of, I think a lot of people trip up on where it's really useful, especially the claims clauses, is you trip up a lot on all of the timings of notices. Same as what Kevin was saying in program, you've got 21 days to review your initial program before it goes from small p to big P, and that becomes your baseline, that becomes the contractor's baseline program. And then you've got 14 days to review and give no objection to the other program. Or perhaps in the FIDIC Yellow Book, your review times in terms of 5.2.2, you have to the engineer has to review the contractor's documents within 21 days. Otherwise, there's a lot of these deeming clauses, which Kevin has sort of stated. I could rant on forever, but I think for me, in my day-to-day life, it's been very useful, especially because I've been on projects that are very claim heavy. And then in kind of a long-term career, it's quite expensive, well, in terms of, you might think it's expensive in terms of the course and the thing, but I think what we're seeing is you're getting the value back quite quickly in terms of efficiency of managing contracts. And I think the FCCM is quite a nice well, especially within Africa and the Middle East and some parts of Europe and even Asia as well. As engineers and professionals, it will allow us to move around a lot more, I think. And we're going to see more and more construction contracts in this format. But yeah, it was very good, Kevin, and it's been a pleasure to to go through this process. If anybody has any questions, please let me know.
Okay, great.
The FCCM exam cost. Oh, sorry, was just jumping the gun there. It's about $1,000, maybe $1,200, because it's in Swiss francs. But if you come from a developing country, you get discounts, but it's still a little bit more pricey.
Yeah. So
That was from Evelyn.
okay, thank you, Ed. And you mentioned a couple of questions there. So the training fee of 750 is exclusive of it's just a training fee. It doesn't include the exam. What it includes is the training for all the modules, the 8 modules, the materials. That's your reference materials, your book, yellow book, silver book. Then it also, of course, includes the 2 mock exams and that you get to appreciate. Doesn't include the exam. The exam fee is, as mentioned by Ed, will vary depending on your country and depends, because I saw. So the FIDIC, under FIDIC credentialing, you can find out, but FIDIC Credentialing Academy, FIDIC Credentialing Limited, because that is the body that gives the certification, you get this price. So if you are in the African continent, you get a discount of, I think, about 35%. Those of you in UAE, I think there's a classification. So just because there's so many of us, I'll recommend that you check the FIDIC Credentialing Limited, because the price will vary. They have what they have what they call regional pricing. So if you're in the US, you're gonna pay more. Your price, your exam is gonna be more than if you're in Africa. So that is something that you might want to check under the FIDIC credentialing. Uh, I see people asking about the presentation. You'll get the presentation. If you join the WhatsApp group, there's a WhatsApp group that link that was being shared. If you join the WhatsApp group, you'll get it almost immediately tonight. Otherwise, the rest of us will get it on your email tomorrow in the evening, because it's gonna be automated, gonna send to you, as well as the recording for this. Yeah, the presentation will get. How can we pass exams smoothly? If you in this class, honestly, if you do the FCCM class and you do the mock exams, I always tell people the mock, as the second mock exam, if you're getting your 85, there's no reason why you shouldn't pass this exam. And the reason why you come to the class is for you to coincidentally, when I was doing my exam, when I was preparing for my exam, there was no structured approach for me to be able to actually know what is coming in the exam. So I hovered from A to B, doing a training there, doing a training here, and I think I spent about $3,800 on trainings, and none of them was really giving me what I wanted. And that is how I ended up doing even the diploma in FIDIC. It was not like I wanted to do it. It was because of wanting to get ready for the exam. So it's something that you want to appreciate and all. So we're going to share with you, if you want to know more about the FIDIC certification and other, please check FIDIC Credentialing Limited. All this information is public information. It's available there under programs. Go to FIDIC Certified Contract Management, check in there and appreciate. But I always want to tell people, and this is what we've seen even previously in our classes, how we've structured the classes is not necessarily that you're going to do the exam. If you're going to do the exam, that is a bonus. Ours is people who just want to master and understand FIDIC at a higher level, and being able to understand between 1999 and 2017, being able to navigate between the clauses, getting real life scenarios on how to and challenges, because the classes are very interactive. We want you to share your experiences. That is what the value is for this certification. So if you go to do the exam, a big bonus for yourself, but the course is really structured to be a level that you understand FIDIC and understand it at a deeper point. That's really the whole idea. The upcoming classes, we have shared a link. You can always check that. As well as the arbitration. So perhaps we can have can you do both can both courses lead to FCCM? I don't know if you're asking both in terms of the FIDIC claims and disputes. The FIDIC claims is narrow. I mean, because we're just focusing on claims and claiming aspects in the contract, then the arbitration process, how you present your claim. So if you want to go to the certification level, then the FIDIC Certified Contract Management Masterclass is what you want to do, as opposed to the claims. The claims is those people who already use FIDIC, understand FIDIC, but they're struggling with claims, they're struggling with the arbitration process, the dispute avoidance process. That is what the FIDIC claims disputes and arbitration is all about. Somebody asked the cost. The claims class, the cost is what is the cost, Brenda? Please put it on the chat. I don't think I it's just escaped me, so I don't misguide people. But if you are, of course, nonetheless, Brenda, you can just put that on the chat as well. But when you click the link for registration, you see that cost as well. Huh? All those costs with the times for the class, they are all indicated there. So I think it's now slightly 7 minutes past the time we promised to finish this class. I don't want to send a notice of extension of time. I would want us to stop there. I'm not sure if anybody has something to say, perhaps not a question. You can put your hand up. I can let you speak. We can have two people. I mean, this can just be about how the session was, by the way. You can also put that on the chat. I hope it was not a waste of your time. Brenda, you can promote. I see Andrew. Andrew, you can unmute yourself and speak. Andrew, you are able to speak now. I saw your hand up. I'm not sure if you wanted to speak up. So that is basically the case. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It was great seeing all of you. At one point, I think more than 500 people on the call. That was just amazing. And I hope you gained something. Huh? So those of you who are keen on advancing your FIDIC forms of FIDIC knowledge, do not hesitate to reach out in the chat, in the group, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the next couple of sessions. So we appreciate. Thank you so much. Have a good night. And
Nice to meet everyone.
good. Thank you.
Cheers,
Ed.
Kevin.
Okay, cheers.